Welcome to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Joyous conversations about what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about our one reality. You have nothing to fear. You are eternal and you are perfectly loved. Knowing the truth changes everything. Now, here's Roberta.
Welcome to Seek Reality. I'm Roberta Grimes, and I'm so happy you're with us today. Today, our guest is a devoted scholar of spiritually transformative experiences, or STEs, that's actually a new term now. We didn't have it even maybe 10 years ago, but he's an expert, and he's been in this field since the beginning. This is John R. Audette's fourth Seek Reality appearance, although his first two times with us were in our first year, and now we're celebrating our 10th year. John's career history has been in medical and hospice administration, which is where he first met people like Dr. Raymond Moody, even before Dr. Moody wrote Life After Life and started this whole process. John also met sainted pioneers in this field like Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, for example. He's the principal founder as well of the International Association for Near-Death Studies, which is also called IANDS. He's a native of South Florida, where he still resides, and his professional career has spanned over 3 decades of senior executive positions in hospice, hospital administration, physician practice management, as well as the performing arts and public broadcasting, so he kind of gets around. He originally earned a BA degree in history and sociology from Augusta College and an MS degree in sociology from Virginia Tech. More recently, John has contributed chapters about spiritually transformative experiences and non-local consciousness to several scholarly books, and he now serves as president and CEO of Eternia, which he co-founded with Dr. Eben Alexander and the late Dr. Edgar Mitchell. This is so wonderful. I love this story. The Apollo 14 astronaut who was the sixth man to walk on the moon. So talk about just absolutely spanning a wonderful time in history. John is a veteran with 3 years of active duty service in the U.S. Army during Vietnam, although he never made it there. And that's unlike my husband, who did make it to Vietnam, but he went as a pathologist. My husband spent his time in Vietnam tooling around Saigon in a chauffeur-driven Jeep. But I guess, does that count as service in Vietnam? I don't know. He talks about it as if it does. John R. Audette has written a book on spiritually transformative experiences, which I think is terrific. I urge you to read it. We can learn a lot from his book because he really was there and he really knows what he's writing about. His book is called Loved by the Light, True Stories of Divine Intervention and Providence, and it's now available on Amazon. We'll talk a little about his book today, but we're going to talk about the history of this whole amazing field, which has now become common knowledge, but even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and certainly 40 years ago, no one had heard of it. John, welcome. It's lovely. It's lovely to have you back here with us again.
It's great to see you, Roberta. Thank you for having me back. You're looking younger every time I see you.
Thank you, dear, so much.
Doing the same great work.
Well, but so are you. I love the things you're doing now. And I want to talk about the history because you were really instrumental in getting this all started. I mean, you met Raymond Moody. He was just discovering near-death experiences. What was that like?
That is a great question, and it's an amazing story. I met Raymond in 1974, 50 years ago, almost to the day, actually. And I have to tell you that it was the ring of destiny when I met him. It was a defining moment of my life, bar none. And that the story didn't begin when I met Raymond. It actually began when I was 8 years old, 1960, yesterday, growing up in Fort Lauderdale. I was in the third grade, and I had a best friend named Mike Waters. And he lived halfway to my house on the way uh, home from school. So I would often stop at his place and enjoy the proverbial milk and cookies. And I loved his mom, Mrs. Waters. She was a delight. One day I heard bad news that she had been taken to the hospital by ambulance. She had a heart attack. She nearly died. Um, about 3 weeks later, she had come home, and I don't know, sometime after that, Mike and I were walking home from school, and he seemed very dejected. And I asked, what's wrong? What's going on? He said, it's my mom. What's wrong with your mom? I thought she was better. Yes, she's better. She didn't die, but she's just different. And I miss my old mom. I want my old mom back. And I said, oh, well, how is she different? And his words, well, she's become a Jesus freak. All she talks about heaven, the angels, God, and Jesus. And she's just different. Well, I thought, wow, okay. I don't know what to make of this, but we stop at his house with the proverbial milk and cookies, and there she is, glowing like a spotlight. I mean, she was truly different. You could see the light coming from her eyes. Her face was aglow. She was lit up like a Christmas tree. Really amazing change. And of course, I'm just fascinated by the physical difference. And of course, when she sees me, she's happy to see me. It's the first time we've seen each other since she had the heart attack. And she's just on about God and love and the angels and heaven and Jesus, and how she had left her body and she went off to heaven to enjoy this wonderful experience. And she just wants me to know that God loves me and Jesus loves me and all is well and nothing to fear. And so, of course, I went out and back with Mike to play, and I said, "Yeah, I know what you mean. I get it. I see what you're talking about." Well, that was my first interview with a near-death experiencer at age 8 in 1960. I didn't know what to make of it. The term hadn't been invented, but it stuck with me forever. Not at the forefront of my consciousness, but kind of, buried in the recesses of my psyche. Well, now I have to fast forward to the year 1968, and I'm going into my junior year. My best friend at the time was Jimmy Madonna. He had an older brother, 4 years older, Dominic Madonna, who had graduated Fort Lauderdale High School in 1967. And Dominic was drafted. I loved Dominic. He was like a big brother to me. Taught me how to drive a car, how to fish, so on. And he was just a great guy. Had Frankie Avalon type looks. He was terrific. Anyway, he went off to join the Army per the draft call, got put into infantry, sent to Vietnam, and in August of 1969, we received the sad news that he was killed in Da Nang in a mortar attack.
Oh, no.
I wrote a tribute to him in the school paper, the high school paper. I was editor in 69, 70. And I never forgot the pain that I felt when I received the news. First time I'd ever experienced death. So when I graduated high school, June of 1970, I went right to the recruiter, the Army recruiter, downtown Fort Lauderdale. And this is all getting to how I met Raymond. And it really kind of evidences what I call cosmic choreography. This is,
Oh, understood. Yeah.
this is my life's purpose unfolding before my very eyes. This is, I suppose, the path that either I chose for myself or that God chose for me. But we need to pay attention to these synchronicities when they happen, because they're little nudge, nudge, wink, winks from spirit. And they're evidential that spirit is around us and paying attention and guiding us, helping us, whether it's to find a parking space or avoid an auto accident or to stay on course with one's life's purpose. So the recruiter said, okay, you're here to enlist. You have a high school diploma and you're 18. Good for you, doing your patriotic duty. how can we help you today? I said, I want the Army and I want infantry and I want to be assigned to this company. I want to do my basic at Fort Jackson and my infantry training at Fort Benning. And I want to go to Da Nang because I want to avenge my friend's death and I want to help the poor oppressed people of South Vietnam. At age 18, that's all I knew. I didn't know any more than that. I found out a lot more later, but at the time, those were the only two motivations for me: serve my country, avenge Dominic, and help the poor oppressed people of South Vietnam. So I was told that he would do everything he could to meet my request, but first I had to take some aptitude tests. I did, and he said, "Sorry, we can't give you infantry." And I said, "Why not?" And he said, "You're scoring too high. You've got to go into this special military occupational specialty called this high-speed encrypted digital communication. You need to get a top secret clearance from the FBI, and you'll work computers." And I didn't know what a computer was. We're talking 1970. Nobody ever heard the word computer. So I certainly hadn't. And so he said, "They'll teach you what you need to know." I said, "No deal. I'm going to Vietnam in infantry. I'm not doing this." He said, "Well, you already signed the contract and, we're doing our best. You'll get to Vietnam because your specialty is needed over there. So don't worry, you'll get there." Okay, great. So I ended up going to Fort Gordon, Georgia, in Augusta, Georgia, for my advanced training because of this aptitude test score. And as it turned out, that's where Raymond Moody was, in Augusta, Georgia, enrolled at the Medical College of Georgia. So I think
It was kismet.
I graduated honor graduate by a fluke, but that was an important fluke. I think he said it was a half a percentage point higher than the next student. He said it's tradition for the undergraduate to stay and teach. And I said, I'm not a teacher. I don't know. He said, "Well, we'll teach you to teach. We'll send you to instructor training." And that too is part of the plan. So you can't refuse tradition. He said, you're going to Germany this rotation, and then the second rotation will be Vietnam. So you get your wish to go to Vietnam after the first year of teaching. I said, "Okay, great. Okay." So I don't know, 6 months or so teaching, I received the honor of being instructor of the month. And the commanding general comes over, presents the award. And after the ceremony, the executive officer comes over and says, "Hey, the general is impressed with you. He'd like you to come work in the command section." I said, "Well, sir, I'm only going to be here for another 6 months. I'm going to Vietnam." "Well, don't you worry about that. We're going to take care of all that." You don't say no to the general. "Okay, sir. All right, I'll do it." So I don't know anything about protocol, but yeah, okay, if that's what the general wants. So this general turned out to be very pivotal because he and I took a liking to each other. He was anti-war because, like, every Sunday he would go to the Dwight Eisenhower Medical Center at Fort Gordon to visit the wounded who were there convalescing, and he wanted to be behind to hear their stories, which is where I got the real truth from the boots on the ground. And he said, "I think you have general officer material. I want you to go to college and become a general officer. I'm going to groom you for that, objective." And I said, "Sir, I appreciate your confidence in me, but I am not college material. I don't have the smarts for college. I barely got through high school." And he said, "Oh, let me be the judge of that. Go to the guidance center, take the CLEP test, college level equivalency program, and we'll see what we see." And I said, "Oh, sorry." He said, "Sergeant, that's an order. This is not a discussion, not a negotiation. It's an order." "Yes, sir." Okay. So I went, I took the CLEP test. Whoa, I mean, I couldn't believe it. He said, "Hey, you finished your freshman year and you got all these credits that we can apply toward your sophomore core curriculum requirements. So you finished almost a year and a half of college just by taking a test." So they admitted me at Augusta College. My first quarter full-time student after discharge, in 1974. I was elected president of the sociology club. We had our first meeting. A woman by the name of Kathy Tabakian was a member. And I asked one question. We were supposed to bring interesting speakers to campus, and I asked if anyone knew of anyone who might want to speak. Kathy was the only one who raised her hand. Kathy is acknowledged in Life After Life. And she said, my neighbor would be perfect, Dr. Raymond Moody. He's a student at the Medical College of Georgia. This is nearby Augusta College. And I said, well, he's a doctor already? Oh, not an MD. He's getting his MD, but he's a PhD, philosophy from University of Virginia. I said, well, what do you lecture about? Plato? That would be boring. Nobody's going to want to hear that. And she said, no. I'm helping him with this very interesting research concerning people who've died and left their bodies and gone to heaven to see God and Jesus, and they come back with these remarkable stories. And of course, then the memory from third grade bubbled up to the surface. Oh my God. I mean, that's when I heard the Ring of Destiny. And now, if I had not heard Mrs. Waters tell her story, I would have, as an agnostic, I probably would have dismissed all of that because I was not spiritual at that time in my life. I gave up the Catholic faith for Lent, and when I left home at age.
Yes, I understand the feeling. Yes.
And I haven't been back since to organized religion. So I was not sure about the whole thing, the whole God question. So I was sort of an avowed agnostic, and I wanted truth, and I needed evidence and data to be convinced of truth. And I would change my beliefs if new data emerged that warranted a change. So I said, Kathy, when can I meet this man? She goes, well, let me talk to him and see if he's open to that, and I'll let you know. So I think it was the next afternoon. I was over to meet Dr. Moody late in the afternoon, and we just hit it off instantly. We were best friends from the start, and Raymond never, he's a very friendly, affable gentleman, and he's a great.
He's so delightful. I mean, frankly, he's such a sweetheart.
He's a little Buddha, and
that's very, very good. Yes, he is.
He's the greatest storyteller you'll ever want to meet.
Yeah.
The greatest humorist. He's got a very interesting sense of humor, and I'm a perfect straight man for him. So he
would be. He would be exactly right.
He used to love being around me for that reason. So anyway, I was helping him and meeting people who had these experiences. And I organized a talk, the first I think he gave on the subject. He had just coined the term near-death experience. He didn't write the book for about a year and a half later. It came out in the fall of 1975.
Mm-hmm.
Great classic that started it all in motion. So, he was having phone chats with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and I started to research who she was, and she agreed to write the foreword, and she was speaking, I think it was Kennesaw Community College outside of Atlanta, not too far away. And I offered to drive Raymond so he could meet her in person. And the three of us met for the first time at that venue, and it was a love fest. And
I'm sure.
They were comparing notes and agreeing with each other about the findings, because she too was researching near-death experiences. And I felt like so privileged to be a fly on the wall there. And I must say that back when I gave Raymond the opportunity to speak at Augusta College, he was happy to do it, but he said, my research is still preliminary. And I said, well, just share what you think you know so far and just qualify it. Well, the Performing Arts Center was packed, and I organized a panel discussion of members of the clergy, other physicians, psychologists, sociologists, and so on, to get a cross-section of opinion. And the Performing Arts Center, I think it seated about 3,000 or 4,000 people. It was packed. It was standing room only. And when Raymond spoke, for the first time, to my knowledge, on near-death experiences, I got goosebumps all over. I mean, I got all I can describe, it was really like a download from spirit, because I recognized the importance of these experiences, not just to transform the people who underwent the experiences, but who, as they shared their stories, Raymond shared some of the things they had said, some of the insights they had shared, and I thought, oh my gosh, this can not only change human nature, this can change the nature of social, political, and economic systems. This can bring heaven to earth. So I got the whole picture from whole to part in this download from spirit, which is what led to the idea to form the association. So I was like an enthusiastic cheerleader for this idea, and I kept hounding Raymond to let me proceed with using his name, because at this time other people were starting to write him, experiencers and researchers, people who wanted to do research. And he was like, I don't believe in organizations, John. I'm not much into that sort of thing.
Yep.
And great idea. You can do it if you want, but I don't want to be part of that. And I thought, Raymond, I can't do it without you. Nobody knows me. They know you. You're the MD, PhD. I'm a lowly master's degree. Nobody's going to pay attention to me. He said, well, but when we had this meeting with Elizabeth, at the right time, I got a little nudge from spirit, and I said, hey, Elizabeth, what do you think about the idea of, and Raymond was there, of course, of an association to bring together people who've had these experiences so they can form a support system for one another, as well as researchers who want to study them. She said, that's a great idea. I think you should do it. I said, well, would you be part of it? She said, tell you what, you organize it, you get it off the ground, and I'll become a member of your board. And I thought that was delightful. So on the drive back from Atlanta, Raymond suddenly got on board, and he agreed to let me form the association. And we held our first organizational meeting in Charlottesville. At that point, Raymond had moved to Charlottesville to do his residency in psychiatry. And we held our first meeting there in his home. And then I think we rented a room at a Holiday Inn, a big conference room. And Bruce Grayson was there, and Ken Ring, and Mike Sabom, and Dr. Beverly Belk, and a few others. Loved the idea of the association, and that's where it was born. They all became co-founders, and that's what eventually became the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I organized it. I ran it for the first 4 or 5 years. I think it's first president. And then I threw the ball over to Ken, and we moved it to the University of Connecticut stores, and he ran it from there, and that's how it all started. But I want everybody to pay attention to all the things that had to happen in order for me to meet Raymond. That cannot be coincidental.
No, obviously.
The mathematics of it are too impressive. So to me, I call it cosmic choreography. Those were dance steps choreographed by God, and I just was kind of like going with the flow. So to me, it's extremely important work, extremely important subject, especially at this time, critical time in human affairs. So that's a long-winded answer to your question about how I met Raymond.
No, but I thought it was fascinating. And he is a delightful person. He's totally friendly. I hadn't seen him in person, in probably 6 or 7 years. And when I first had him on to talk about this most recent book, I said, hi. And he said, hi. Oh, how are you? The last time I saw him, I had dinner with him at some conference, but he remembered me and he was so friendly. That's Raymond. That's who he is.
A ball of love.
Yeah, that's exactly who he is. It was like, where have I been all this time? All he wanted to do is talk about, old times and, how I've been and all that. He's such a lovely, lovely man.
He really is. And a prodigious intellect, always reading, always writing, always coming up with new ideas. And, he just has a indefatigable spirit.
He keeps trying new things.
Yes,
He coined near-death experiences, shared death experiences. That's something new no one had ever heard of before. And he did his psychomantium. He does stuff. A
yes,
lot of people don't want to try these new things. He could have just rested on his near-death experiences laurels for the rest of his life, and nobody would have thought anything of it. But he keeps trying new ideas.
exactly. He's a credit to the human race. I wish there were more like him.
Yeah, lovely man. But so all right. So you've been doing this. You've been doing your professional work, and then you got you got involved with Evan Alexander and his project. Tell us about that project now
Oh, yeah,
too.
that's Eternia, and I call it IANS 2.0. Um, as I say, I ran IANS for the first 4 or 5 years, and then Ken took it over from there. And it became clear to me early on that IANS wanted to be oriented around the near-death experience, and it really wanted to be a support system for people who had these experiences, and a data pool for researchers who wanted to study them. And that seemed to be, uh, for the most part, the focus that everyone was comfortable with.
Yes, that's how it's turned out. I
Yeah,
think you're right.
yeah. And so that to me was, and those activities are very important. I don't wish to denigrate them in any way. They're vitally important. But my interest has always been at the macro level. How can we harvest and harness the knowledge from these experiences to impact human nature in general and to change the nature of social, political, and economic systems? How can we use this information, apply it in practical ways to make the world a much better place before we self-destruct? Because we continue as human species, we continue to make very poor choices coming from a very limited myopic frame of reference. And Elizabeth was very concerned about this. Um,
Yes.
Raymond was too, to a degree, but not to the extent that
It's hard
Elizabeth.
to get him down enough for him to be concerned about those things.
So it was
He's
all
a
about,
bundle of joy, kind of.
yeah, I mean, Elizabeth was, we need to learn to love one another or we're going to self-destruct.
That's right.
And she
Yeah,
was, she didn't pull punches. She didn't mince words. She didn't equivocate. For her, it was
true.
always evidential of life after death. Raymond equivocated for quite some time until he finally, went into the deep water. Yeah, because the evidence was overwhelming for him at some point. But
Yeah,
Elizabeth was there from the very beginning. She was right there with me, philosophically. We were aligned,
right.
and she had the same sense of urgency. We need to do expeditious work in this area for all the good it can do. So I kind of took my leave from IANS at that point, I think 1985 or so, because I realized that it was going to focus on the micro level priorities, which were important, but it wasn't what interested me. So it was around that time that I started collaborating with Edgar Mitchell. And Edgar, being a scientist from a PhD from MIT and an astronaut and a career naval aviator, he was a man of science and he was interested in physics and cosmology. And he wanted to take the approach of a physicist to
But he had,
consciousness.
on his way back from the moon, he had a spiritually transformative experience, as I
Yes.
recall.
Yes, he did. Called the Oneness Epiphany.
Yes.
He went to the moon. He said a technician, and he came back. He said a humanist and a futurist. Um, and he's, because of this Oneness Epiphany, where he just realized that everything was part of the same grand matrix. It was somehow interconnected, interrelated, interdependent.
He looked at the blue marble from,
Yeah,
from the spaceship coming back.
yeah,
I remember reading about it at
yeah,
the time. It was quite
yeah.
overwhelming.
Well, he came back and he formed the International, it's called Noetics, the Institute of Noetic Sciences.
Yes, that's right.
Noetic.org. And it was because he wanted to know more about what happened to him. Um,
Right.
the people he consulted, some of them said he had a samadhi, um, or an epiphany, or the oneness epiphany, and it led him to consciousness. Well, he wanted to explore consciousness from the standpoint of a physicist.
Yes.
And, how can we answer whether consciousness survives death if we can't define consciousness? To this day, science doesn't have an accepted.
They don't get it at all. You're right.
Right. So, because they're looking at it from the materialistic paradigm. But
That's
anyway,
right.
so Ed got interested in quantum hologram, and he said, John, this is another way to get where you want to go, but through the mantle of hard science, as opposed to he called it pseudoscience, of near-death experiences, because that's all anecdotal
Well,
stuff.
that wasn't very nice of him.
Well, he PhD from MIT, and he's a slide rule kind of guy, a numbers kind of guy, and he wanted evidence too, hard evidence, stuff you could test in a laboratory, measure in a test tube. That was his training, and I respected him for it. And I said, the only way we're going to get to paradigm shift is to have hard evidence, such as what he was describing.
Hmm.
So I learned about the quantum hologram and about the quantum world, the world of quanta, and how it interfaces with consciousness through thought and intention, torsion
Hmm.
physics, the spin fields that impact particle behavior. And I got very excited about it because I thought, this is great, because this certainly will get everybody to stand up and take notice. And nobody was interested in learning about the quantum hologram or quantum emission and absorption or quantum entanglement. So that didn't really go over very well. And in 2011, IANS invited me to come speak. They asked me to come speak every 10 years or so as one of the founders, to celebrate the anniversary. And Evan Alexander was in the audience, and Raymond and Bruce and I were up on stage and giving our recollections. And Evan came up to me afterward and introduced himself and said, "Hey, I'm trying to write a book. I'm a neurosurgeon. I've had an NDE, and I would like to get help with my book and getting it published." I said, "Well, sure, will you come to my speech tomorrow? I'm going to talk about my experience." So I said, "Sure, I'm happy to do it." And he said, "I was a materialist at Harvard. I taught that when the body dies, so does consciousness, but I don't believe that anymore." So he said, "Tell me about you. How did you make this transition from being an agnostic to being a man of conviction? Did you have an experience?" I said, "None of the kind you're describing, no. I have many others, which of course I write about in my book, including life-saving angel encounters. But I said, I've never been out of my body that I know of, and I've never traveled to the other side that I know of, like you have." And he said, "Well, I want to know all about IANS, how it started, and why you kind of took leave from it, and what you're doing with Edgar Mitchell." So I went through all of it with him, and he said, "We got to work together." He said, I came back for this purpose. So we formed Eternia at that point, which IANS 2.0. It's only, it was to embrace the things that were important to me at the macro level versus what IANS was focused on. I thought about trying to approach ions to work together, but I didn't think that they were I don't think the culture was ready to go where I wanted to go at that point. And maybe not even today. I don't know, but I'm not really that connected with it. But I brought Evan to meet Ed. There was a meeting of the minds, and we said we're not getting anywhere with Quantrek and the quantum hologram because nobody wants to talk about it. Whenever you mention quantum physics, and everybody glazes over and they have to excuse themselves for a bathroom break. So but near-death experiences, especially from a Harvard neurosurgeon, maybe we can finally get funded. So we agreed to join forces, and Eternia became the metaphysical side, and Quantrek became the physics side of it. So different avenues of inquiry and different research designs, but nevertheless equally valid and equally headed in the same direction. And I thought it was very exciting because you're approaching it, from two different directions, but they were flip sides of the same coin. So Edgar died in 2016. We never attracted the kind of funding we were hoping to receive for Quantrek. And at that point, we just kind of let it go, and we just became Eternia and stayed focused on spiritually transformative experiences in general, all phenomena that point to the question of what is consciousness and its disposition at the point of physical death. So that's what happened there. That's how that evolved.
Well, you've certainly been at the center of all of this, which to me is a fascinating place to be. I mean, you've seen so much. You've been and I think your personality is very good for this, because you've been around some big egos, big minds, big ideas, and you've just been very supportive of all these people. You were sort of the glue in many of these cases, I think.
Well, thank you. And I'm humbled by your compliments. And this data, this evidence has impacted me profoundly. And that's really what my book is about, how I went from being an agnostic to being a man of deep conviction, not based on faith and dogma, but based on data, evidence. And I am constantly reminded from an evidential point of view that the spiritual realm is real, that we're surrounded by eternity and infinity, that the angels are real, God is real. And I mean, I get reminders of it all the time, and they're minor miracles, sometimes they're major miracles. And I just want to shake people and say, would you please wake up and smell the roses? Because we don't have to be living in a cesspool. I mean, we can get out and swim in the ocean. We can dance on the clouds. We don't have to be stuck in the tar pits clubbing each other with femur bones, for crying out loud. So, I'm like, people see, even with Eternia, as simple as I try to make it, well, we don't quite get it. These 7 statements and these 15 elaborations, which people can read at eternia.org, how is this going to change the world?
Oh, John.
Yeah, let me
I get emails every day from people who don't get it. And I just want to shake them by their shoulders or their throat and say, my God, don't you get it? Don't you understand?
You're absolutely right to feel that way, and I share those feelings. At the same time, I mean, let's put it this way, I wouldn't quite be so on edge about it if we weren't in such a terrible state of affairs on the planet. But it's getting worse by the day. And I don't know how much time we have, and time is an illusion, I grant you, but
I've just started to teach a course and get as many people as possible to just sit for a minute and get this basic stuff.
So let me tell you the story before we run out of time, because I know time.
Yeah, go ahead. Because
this is another piece of the puzzle, another piece of evidence about how God communicates. And just when you think, you're getting frustrated and you're not making the impact you want to make, and nobody understands the big picture, and nobody wants to fund what you're doing because they don't understand it, even as simple as you try to make it. So David Lorimer, who heads up the Scientific and Medical Network of Europe, was celebrating his 50th anniversary this year, and he gave me the honor of being part of the celebration, a different speaker every week for a certain period of time in honor of being 50 years old. So I accepted. It was a great privilege. And he came back and he chose the date of February 14 for my talk. And I said, David, why did you choose that date? He said, I don't know, just random, at random. I said, did the Spirit guide you to choose that date? He said, not that I know of. I think it just seemed to work. Well, David, that's a very synchronistic choice, because that's the first anniversary of my book. I published it a year ago, February 14. I published it as a love letter to God. And that's all I said. I said, do you mind if I do something on the theme of love, since it's Valentine's Day? He said, no, go ahead, but send me a draft of what you propose to say, because, we're talking hardcore scientists and medical doctors and throughout Europe. And I said, okay, great. So I said, let me tie it to Valentine's Day. I did not know where Valentine's Day came from. I just decided to research the history. And I found a man named Valentinus who lived in ancient Rome. He was martyred in the year 269, beheaded by Claudius II because he was a Christian. And he was a healer as well. That's how he got on the radar screen. How do you do these healings? I'm just a vessel for God's love. God's love, Jesus, the love of Jesus comes through me and heals the person I'm working on. And I can't say more than that. I don't understand it. It's just the grace of God. You sure you're not a sorcerer? You're not doing black magic or, booga booga? And, Valentinus is, I'm a Christian. It all comes through love of God, love of Christ. Well, we're not too fond of Christians. This is the Roman Empire, 3rd century. And, we put Christians to death in a very brutal way. So because you have this gift, I'm going to give you a choice. You can either go to your death in a brutal way, or you can renounce Christianity. He said, I have to be true to what is true. I know this is true because it's working and I feel it. It would be like telling me to deny my own existence or to deny the sun. Can't do it. Okay, off to the dungeon with you. So he's put in the dungeon and sentenced to die. And the jailer, who had heard about his healing ability, had a blind daughter named Julia. And he said, Valentinus, would you do me a favor and try to heal my daughter? Julia, she's been blind since birth. And he said, I'll try. The healing part is up to God. I'm just a vessel. So he worked on her, and sure enough, her blindness was cured. And the jailer became a Christian, along with his entire household. Seeing is believing. So he couldn't spare Valentinus because he was on the radar screen of the emperor, but he did release as many Christian prisoners as he could without evoking wrath. And the night before, or the wee hours before his death, I guess he stayed awake, he was executed on February 14. He's now Saint Valentine, or Saint Valentinus in the Catholic Church. He wrote a letter to Julia, a love letter, but it wasn't eros, it was agape love. It was, Julia, thank you for letting me be a vessel for God's love, and love is all there is. And, I'm grateful to you for having this one more opportunity to feel God's love coursing through me. And he signed it, Your Valentine. So historians generally regard that letter as the first Valentine's Day love letter. And that's how the tradition originated. Now, tell me something. Is that magical or what?
That's beautiful.
So that's my life is full of stories like this. And I'm just giving you a couple. My book's got several more that are worth reading. And if my stories don't convince people of of the existence of God, then I give all kinds of ways they can have their own epiphanies, and so that God becomes real to them. But the bottom line is, if we don't start doing what Kubler-Ross recommended all those years ago, we don't start loving one another, then I feel that we're going to have a dark night of the soul collectively, and it's not going to be pleasant. And it's all going to be self-inflicted. So we don't have to go down that road. We have free will. We can change it. Apocalyptic visions, Armageddon, this doesn't have to happen. Now, the probabilities may be, given human nature, that it's going to happen. But if they read the book and heed the book, go to the Eternia website and heed the messages there, then we can have a much better time of it down here.
Fortunately, Jesus is working through you and quite a few people now to try to change things.
Yep.
As I said, I'm also teaching a course in following the teachings of Jesus, and we're in our beta course, and I think it's already helping people. So I'm going to continue to do it.
Absolutely.
So each of us has our own way to kind of try to make this work. Each one teach one. Well, I'm so sorry, but we really have run out of time. We'll have to do this again, my dear.
Yes, I would love to. Thank you, Roberta. It's great to see you again, and keep on doing the good work.
And you as well. I think what you're doing is great. I mean, I belong to Eternia, or at least I did. I don't know that they're still collecting dues, but I used to pay dues to it.
No, we don't collect dues anymore. People can make contributions if they choose to through PayPal at eternia.org. And it's tax deductible. We're a 501c3. But we don't solicit, and we don't do active fundraising. Eternia is a big ship. It's got 7 program components. It's going to require a huge budget to operationalize. So, I mean, since I don't seem to have prospects for that, I just kind of like let go and let God on the question of funding.
Yeah, I think that's best too. That's what we're doing with teachingsbyjesus.com. We're sort of seeing where it wants to go. And I think you need to do that too. Yeah, that's a good thing. But I'm a supporter. I think what you're doing is great.
Well, bless your heart. Thank you.
But anyway, I'm so sorry. We have totally run out of time. And all my dear, dear friends, this has been really, I think, quite special. This has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. I'm so happy you could be with us today. Please never forget that you are a powerful, eternal being. You never began, you never will end. And when you get that, it changes everything in your life for the better. Next week, our guest will be Brandy Gilmore. Brandy's a researcher and a mind-body healing expert. She had an accident in 2003 and left her disabled and in pain, and the doctors couldn't help her, so she figured she'd better help herself. And what she discovered was I don't really even get this because I haven't gotten far enough into her book, but self-healing mechanisms using our minds that are not the normal meditation. And she claims in the book, and as I say, I haven't read far enough, the book is called Master Your Mind and Energy to Heal Your Body. She discovered ways to heal herself, and now she's this gorgeous woman who's all healed, and she shares the research there in that book that changed her life, and she's now using it to help others. She's also done a TEDx talk. This sounds fascinating, don't you think? Especially for people who have chronic pain. And join us next week. Let's see what she has to tell us. And this week, our guest has been John R. Audette, who was here for the 4th time. And I think his stories are fascinating because he has been in the spiritually transformative experiences field since its beginning. And as you can see, he's a wonderfully thoughtful man who has made wonderful friends and done wonderful things. And he's working very hard now to kind of bring humankind back from the brink, which to me is what we all should be doing in our own special ways. His book is called Love by the Light, True Stories of Divine Intervention and Providence. And I think it's a wonderful book. I urge everyone to read it. So I hope you've enjoyed today. I certainly have. And now, of course, it's time once again to just mention that Seek Reality Online is your one-stop resource for all things afterlife. Just go to seekreality.com and start to learn for yourself that your own reality really is eternal. Our dear friend Craig Hogan works very hard to help people understand there, and the resources he has there are almost unbelievable. He works hard to help people understand that your life really is eternal. And teachingsbyjesus.com is your single resource for all the divine truths that Jesus taught. You can't get them from Christianity, frankly, which is not his religion. He didn't have anything to do with starting it. That was the Roman Emperor Constantine, and it happened 300 years after Jesus was risen. But now, as the religion kind of fades, Jesus has finally decided it's time for his truths. So if you start with something like teachingsbyjesus.com, or even just get yourself a red letter Bible and start reading the Gospels, you can finally meet Jesus where he lives. And that's about all we have time for. So this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Please enjoy and make the most of this coming week in our one reality, always knowing, always certain that you are a powerful, eternal being, and knowing, never forgetting for a moment that you, most of all in this entire universe, you are perfectly, infinitely, and forever eternally loved.
You've been listening to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Roberta blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. Join us every week as we explore what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about the one reality we all share. Knowing the truth changes everything.